Okie dokie. So we have skipped over the type sections, and we've gone to the last section, which is actually, I'll check right here. Yeah, so we did all this stuff here, and then we stopped here. We didn't do any of this. You can read it yourself. Oh yeah, and I gotta remember to edit the videos I already uploaded to include the links to this text, and some other links I want to add to. I've just forgot to do that, but I'll do that in a moment. But anyway, so we're at section 3, and that concerns basically intertype relations, and it's also the titular section of the book that has, syntax of love. That's what the book is called, and this is what the section is called. And then I'll also, I don't know, I might do this stuff here. This is kind of funny. It's like, I think this book was written in something like, I don't know, early 90s. So it's post Soviet era, as far as I'm aware, but it still includes this, what I feel is kind of like a Soviet era holdover, where he has this appendix that's, appendix, inevitability, Russian supreme power in the light of psychosophy, as if like the book has to be justified to some Soviet censor, as to why it will bring glory to the Soviet Union. And I forget. I've read this book all the way through once before, and I kind of forget what that section involves, but I just think it's funny that it's just the way it's described right there, especially being in all caps. But yeah, anyway, so we're going to do this section, syntax of love. And let me remove that thing. Okay. Syntax of love, section 3, introduction to love syntax. Okay. Plutarch's admonition to spouses contains one interesting old anecdote. It sounds like this. The Roman whom his friends reproached for divorcing his chaste, rich, and beautiful wife put his foot forward and said to them, "This shoe also looks beautiful and is not at all worn out, but no one knows where it is. I'm tired." Hmm. So, trying to interpret the meaning of that here. Give me one moment. So he divorced his chaste, rich, and beautiful wife, put his foot forward and said, "This shoe also looks beautiful and is not at all worn out, but no one knows where it is. I'm tired." Uh, don't know. Don't know how to interpret that one. A similar sounding tale was told about Couperin. They said that when asked how he was doing 6 months after the wedding, he allegedly answered, "A good wife is like a worn out boot. You can't feel her." At first glance, nothing but the theme and the shoe metaphor unite both stories. But actually, it is not. In both stories, there is an overt and covert sign of trouble. The ancient Roman felt the closeness of his wife too keenly. Couperin did not feel her at all. But regardless of the degree of comfort of the situation, both testified in their statements to the presence of some kind of flaw in family life, albeit perceived differently. Okay, fair enough. God knows where and who performs marriages for us. Okay, so I guess what he's saying there is like only God knows like how marriages come to be, but the conscious or unconscious sense of dysfunction in family life is so widespread that one thing is obvious: they are concluded anywhere but in heaven. Uh, the gigantic percentage of marriages, sorry for the involuntary pun, so there must have been a pun in Russian there, simply excludes divine providence. Pretty dismal, but accurate. To many, marriage seems to be the biggest deception or self deception in their life. And the most unfortunate thing is that, in essence, it is so. We are ignorant of the mechanisms of formation of our and other people's inner worlds, of the system that determines mutual attraction or rejection. That almost in 100 cases out of 100, we rush excitedly towards the deceitful sound of a hunting decoy and are convinced of our mistake, usually only when we find ourselves on the killing line. Brutal. In literary circles of the first half of the 19th century, they loved to mock Belinsky's marriage. They said about his wife that, when she got married, she was already of mature age, completely sickly and with a nervous trembling all over her body. Her movements were angular and devoid of any grace. Maria Vassilievna, who followed Russian journalism, delighted Belinsky with her reasoning, read from her own articles. He took the lesson repeated by her as manifestations of his own development. He became passionately carried away, as he was generally inclined to be carried away by the ideals of his own imagination, and got married. Of course, even such an enthusiastic person as Belinsky could not be mistaken indefinitely. The truth eventually revealed itself in all its terrible nakedness, and quite possibly partly hastened the premature death of the famous critic. Ooh. Get my yawns out between page turns. The story of Belinsky's marriage, at first glance, looks curious, but in fact, the only curious thing about it is that the source of Belinsky's delusion lies on the surface and is visible to the naked eye. More often, the reasons for deception and self-deception are hidden so deeply that they remain a mystery not only to outside observers, but also to the participants in the marriage drama themselves. There is no way to list all the sources of mutual tension, so I will cite only one, seemingly paradoxical but correct observation by La Bruyere, according to which even what is generally considered a virtue in society can become a source of tension. He wrote, oh man, I almost said Cleanthes. I guess Cleanthes is a most noble man, and he married an excellent, very intelligent woman. Each of them is the adornment and pride of any society. Such decent and courteous people are rarely found in the world, but tomorrow they separate. The notary is already ready for the act of separation. Obviously, other virtues are incompatible. And then it just repeats, other virtues are incompatible. Among other things, La Bruyere correctly identified the nerve of the problem, compatibility. The well-being or unwellness of life together is not based on conventional categories such as vice, virtue, etc., but on the compatibility or incompatibility of the sum of the mental properties of one individual with the sum of the mental properties of another. Yeah, so he's kind of giving these examples from, literature, history of people that, didn't end up being compatible and had to separate due to their differing psychotypes, their differing psychologies. So the last example, they were both, really good people and high quality, but they just couldn't make it work, and it's because of this compatibility. It's not because of their virtues or vices necessarily. So yeah, I mean that's a pretty big claim, right? So we're going to have to kind of trust him on that one as we read forward. However, what kind of fata morgana is this that promising a person unearthly bliss in the company of the chosen one so cruelly deceives him in the end? In most cases, the answer to this question will be one: love. Love is an almost universally known but elusive feeling, analyzed countless times and yet not given into the hands of researchers. And since the topic of love cannot be considered new, I think it will not be a great sin if I make another small, but okay, so if he makes another small contribution to the long-standing dispute about his nature. It has already been said before that love is closely connected with emotion, and a person learns, but he also said love is connected to being second volition. In fact, he said that only second volition types can truly love. So there are a lot of contradictions in this text, and maybe it's like subtle translation differences, like maybe in Russian he's using two words that kind of mean love, but they kind of mean different things, and he used one for 2V, and now he used one for emotion, and using one for this, but the translation is just, collapsing them all into our word love. I don't know. I have no clue. But maybe he's also just contradictory and he's forgetting what he wrote, a few sections ago. So it's already been said that love is closely associated with emotion, and a person learns about its arrival by the strength of the experienced and observed experiences. Therefore, the romantic, with his excessive first emotion, is, as it were, both amorous and potentially loved, while the cracker with its ulcer in the third emotion, on the contrary, is, as it were, initially not disposed to fall in love and to arouse passions. Thus, nature, based on emotional function alone, seemed to automatically distribute who should love and be loved and who should not. Everything would be exactly like this if emotion were a truly autonomous and exclusive source of such a complex feeling as love. In fact, the felt and observed seething of feelings is not a being, but a derivative of love. The true essence of love is hope, or better said, an illusion that is born in the subconscious of an initially flawed individual, as if a person has finally been found, paired with whom it is possible to achieve previously absent but passionately desired wholeness and fullness of being. Let's remember Plato's myth about androgynes. And according to him, the first people were bisexual creatures, androgynes, but the gods cut them off, and since then, each of the severed halves has been looking for the lost half, the other merging with which it could again become a fully fledged being, invulnerable, self-sufficient, harmonious. Actually, the myth of androgynes is the only true figurative expression of the essence of love. The hope of a twisted individual that a soulmate has been found who can exactly fill all the fractures of his being stimulates emotional outbursts, breeds the illusion of quickly achieving happiness, achieving integrity, completeness, harmony, and even objectivity in the perception of the world. After all, as Gogol rightly wrote, everyone has something that another does not have. Everyone has a different nerve than another, and only friendly exchange and mutual help can make it possible for everyone to see an object with equal clarity and from all sides. Saying that love is a derivative of the initial hope of a flawed individual to fill the gap, the fracture of one's nature, with another being, thereby achieving wholeness and invulnerability, one cannot ignore the problem of the essence of that gap that drives one person to another. If you look at the matter through the prism of psychosophy, it will become obvious that the first function, redundant and effective, does not need any addition or partner. The second function has other requests, and I don't really know if that makes sense to me. If you look at the matter through the prism of first function, redundant and effective, does not need any addition or partner. I mean, you would think that, for example, a first volition type would complement a fourth volition type. I mean, to me, that makes sense, and that is, taken for granted in attitudinal psyche, and other derivatives of psychosophy. And I don't know if he later changes that view that he just expressed, that it doesn't need any addition or partner. I don't remember, but that does stand out to me as untrue. The second function has other requests. She feels the need for a partner, but not out of scarcity. It's just that the process is more valuable to her than the result, and there is no full-blooded process without a partner. The second does not love but regrets. But it's not for nothing that in Russia's, in the old days, the word regret was almost synonymous with the word love. There's some kind of attractive, incomprehensible strength and weakness, and there is also sweetness and pity. Therefore, we can say that if not for love, then for pity. The second function is very inclined, although it is not in any way disposed towards feverish passion, and the feeling that it usually experiences for a partner is difficult to characterize as love. Yeah, and I will say too that the first function is redundant and effective and excessive, and it doesn't need, like, the nature of the first function can be described as independence. It's the independent function where you are sovereign and confident and you don't need anyone else. That makes sense, but if we're talking about like type complementariness, which is what he's talking about in this, then I think there is, while that's the first function's kind of superficial view, on a deeper level, there is a complement with the fourth function. So yeah, basically I think, I don't know, don't take that the wrong way, essentially. But yeah, second function, pity, that kind of makes sense. Yep. The third function remains. I think we're missing a guy. I don't know if there's a missing section that involved the fourth. It might have been cut off. Uh, but he says the third function remains. And here we must stop in our search. The third meets all the necessary conditions. It is processional and therefore interested in having a partner, but it is also flawed, vulnerable, and therefore needs to be supplemented, developed, and protected. It is the third function, whatever it may be, emotion, logic, physics, or will, that tends to stimulate the search for a mate more than others. In short, let's not cheat further and immediately admit that the only erogenous function, in the literal sense of the word, is the third. Only she, due to her weakness and vulnerability, is capable of warming the blood, creating illusions, making self-deception desirable and joyful. Okay. I don't know. I guess we'll see what more he says about it. Love is a special state of euphoria caused by the illusion of finding happiness in a pair with a subject sufficiently endowed with those mental properties in which one feels lacking. However, here I must immediately upset the reader. The essence of love is better characterized not as hope, but as an illusion precisely because the aspirations of the lover either do not come true at all or come true when the aspirations themselves, and with them the euphoria, have long evaporated. Love disappears when it ceases to hope or fear. La Rochefoucauld used to say, and he was right, euphoria dies along with the death of rosy expectations and the fears associated with them. If you recall your unhappy experience, look through specialized and fiction literature. You can even name the time period allotted by life for love, i.e., to euphoria. Both specialists and simply experienced people. I don't know why, but almost everyone mentions one figure: 3 years. Just remember 3 years by Chekhov. So love lasts for 3 years, I guess. It's interesting to note that these purely subjective observations regarding the 3 year period have recently received experimental scientific confirmation. Oh man, I'm so sorry for yawning all the time. American endocrinologists have hypothesized that the stimulator of love, excitement, is a special hormone called REA. It is this hormone that turns lovers into amorous drug addicts and fetishists. But since over time the brain receptors become accustomed to REA and there are no resources to increase the dose, then after 2 to 4 years the hormone loses its strength. A biological explanation was also found for this phenomenon as a means developed by evolution to keep parents together during the most difficult and dangerous time for the child, the first 2 to 4 years. In general, one gets the impression that if mental typology is responsible for the nature of relationships, then the endocrine system is responsible for their intensity. Feelings and the hormones responsible for them have the ability to mature, therefore the same combination of psychotypes, which in youth aroused only mutual sympathy, i.e. a surge of subtle hormones as endorphin and serotonin in adulthood, can cause true love, genuine passion, i.e. explosion of the all binding hormone REA. I know such cases. Okay. Of course, getting used to REA, or in other words, parting with illusions, is a terribly painful process that completely emotionally and spiritually devastates a person. Memories of past feelings bring additional tension into the relationship between former lovers, and the stronger the love, the more electricity accumulates between them. As Tolstoy wrote, the main reason for family misfortunes is that people are brought up in the idea that marriage gives happiness, the same things that should be redeemed: care, satisfaction, help. All this is taken for granted. Nevertheless, shortcomings are not due, and they suffer the more happiness was expected from the marriage. Based on what has been said, one could assume that at the end of the third year, from the beginning of the novel, from the beginning of, like, I guess, a novel, the time when the love was novel, meaning new, there should be a time of sudden movements, breaks, divorces, etc. However, this is not so, and even quite the opposite. At the end of the novel period, there's usually complete calm in the relationship. There are several reasons for this. Firstly, by that time, a person has acquired such a mass of derivatives from his love, children, relatives, property, friends, etc., that a break with them turns out to be more painful than a break directly with the object of former passion. Secondly, by the end of the novel, the individual feels so spiritually, emotionally, and physically devastated that he usually does not have the strength to look beyond the circle outlined by the novel. Uh, In addition, the one sidedness and narrow mindedness of all love does not imply the emergence of any serious alternative on the horizon. Okay. Finally, from the very fact of losing rose colored glasses, it does not at all follow that, having parted with illusions and looking at a partner, not to say with an objective but calm look, a person is automatically convinced of his mistake, finds further life together impossible, unpromising. The final words of the hero of Chekhov's story, 3 years, we'll wait and see, accurately reflects the mass mentality of people who have parted with illusions and survived a storm of love. We'll wait and see, they say, following Chekhov's Laptev, looking as if for the first time at their partner with a dull, distant, searching gaze. This is the usual ending of love. As for the scenario of later life, it depends not on passions, but on the psychotype of the participants in the drama and the system of love that at one time attracted them to each other. There are three systems of love, or in other words, three main combinations of the third function with the functions of the opposite side, which can cause euphoria and give rise to love. And to designate each of the systems, we will to use, so as not to reinvent the wheel, three terms known since the time of ancient Greece, denoting different types of love. Eros, love based on the principle of opposition; philia, love based on the principle of identity; and agape, love is an evolution that moves partners from opposition to identity. Okay. Of the listed systems, only the last one, agape, is truly fruitful and can claim to be a genuine formula of love. But to be convinced of this, it is necessary to analyze all types of love combinations. Okay, so I'm going to make these separate videos, so I'll stop this one here.